Hey, greetings everyone. It's GleeCon here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. On our last episode, we looked at the Alliance and Horde Compendium. Again, it was just sort of like a curiosity. It showed how to make Dungeons and Dragons in the Warcraft campaign setting into like a real-time strategy game. In our last lore episodes, we've just been looking at Cycle of Hatred, and the Burning Blade is manipulating the already existing animosities between the Alliance and the Horde, because we know they have to pretty much get back to war before we can start the World of Warcraft. And in Chronicles, we looked at the founding of Durotar. So stay a while and listen as we read our next part of Chronicles. It's called The Fleet of Kul Tirans, I don't know. Though the Horde and the humans of Theramore Island maintained peace for years, it did not last. Yet it was not War Chief Thrall or Jaina Proudmoore who reignited war. That's what we're reading about now. A massive Alliance naval armada arrived on the shores of Kalimdor. It was led by Jaina's father, Grand Admiral Dalen Proudmoore. The fleet immediately launched attacks against the orcs and nearby troll settlements. Admiral Proudmoore had fought in the Second War, and he had even lost a son to the Horde. He had no intention of letting the creatures who had nearly destroyed the human kingdoms regain their strength. His goal was nothing less than extermination. Yeah, it's hard when you have like a genocidal person, and I'm not saying I don't see, it's not like it's illogical where the hatred's coming from, but yeah, it's not going to work for the greater picture. Thrall hoped to make peace with the humans and convince them that his new horde was not like the one of old that had decimated the eastern kingdoms. Yet he never had the chance to make his plea. Admiral Proudmoore dispatched assassins disguised as emissaries from Theramore to lure Thrall into a trap and end his life. The ruse failed, and war became inevitable. Thrall rallied the orcs, the Darkspear trolls, the Tauren, and even the nearby Stonemaul Overclan for battle. Yeah, and those are the parts we missed out on some of that in Act 2 of the bonus campaign. Time was not on their side. Despite the impassioned urging of his daughter Jaina, Admiral Proudmoore had taken over Theramore and now had control of both the sea and a defensible city. If given time to fortify his position, he would be able to launch strikes across Kalimdor with impunity. The Horde's armies traveled to Theramore and quietly reached out to Jaina. Thrall asked her to do the impossible, let the Horde into Theramore so they could kill her father. Otherwise, Dalen Proudmoore would extinguish the Horde forevermore. Unlike her father, Jaina knew that Thrall's horde was different from its predecessor. She had seen proof of that with her own eyes. She had stood alongside the horde against the Burning Legion and witnessed the valor and honor of its soldiers. They wanted the same thing she and many of her followers did, an end to the cycle of hatred between the Horde and the Alliance. She saw the bloodshed between the factions as a distraction. The Scourge and other threats still lingered on Azeroth. The world's noble races needed to be united in strength to focus on their true enemies. She had tried to convince her father of that, but he refused to listen. Devastated by the seemingly impossible choice, Jaina stood aside, asking only that the Horde spare as many of her people as they could. The armies of the Horde assaulted Theramore and cut their way through the city. Rexxar himself inflicted the mortal blow on Grand Admiral Dalen Proudmoore. He was no stranger to how blind prejudice and hatred could darken the hearts of good soldiers. He had seen that fate befall many members of the old Horde. He urged Jaina Proudmoore to remember her father for the proud warrior he had been, not for the person he had become. The Horde left the city in Jaina's hands after the deed was done. Most of the survivors of Dalen's fleet sailed back to the eastern kingdoms. Following the battle, Rexxar decided not to remain with the Horde. He had grown accustomed to hunting alone, and he returned to the wilds where he felt at peace. However, he made it clear that he would fight to defend the Horde whenever it needed him, and that wraps up the Frozen Throne the entire game. Let's look at this anger of Kul Tirans, the anger of Kul Tirans. Not only was Grand Admiral Dalen Proudmoore a military commander, but he was also ruler of the human nation of Kul Tirans. His people cried out for vengeance for his death, but the rest of the Alliance did not seek it. The plague of undeath in Lordaeron had already left the Alliance reeling, and its other leaders had little pity for Dalen Proudmoore, who had launched a war of aggression on his own authority. In fury, the people of Kul Tirans isolated themselves from the rest of the Alliance. But their anger was not focused on King Varian Wrynn or any of the other Alliance leaders. Instead, they grew to hate Jaina Proudmoore, the daughter who had betrayed her family, which is how the scene begins in Battle for Azeroth. It also explains why they're not part of the Alliance, and you don't get the Kul Tiran race until Battle for Azeroth, when Jaina finally kind of bridges that gap. All right, cool. So we got another one of these lore of Warcrafts all done and in the pipe. 5x5.